Drew Joseph. What's up, man?
Hey, how's it going?
How you doing?
I'm doing good.
So, I don't really know you very well. We met at Howard's.
Good old Howard's.
In Bowling Green a few weeks ago. You were doing solo acoustic stuff that night. Is that generally what your music is? Are you a solo acoustic guy?
Yeah, I've kind of had my hands in a couple different pots, as it were, I guess. But right now, that's kind of what I'm focusing on. Just sort of being in bands through, my teens and like early 20s. It's like I wasn't always super confident as a songwriter, and now I kind of feel like I've built up a handful of songs that I really feel good about. So I'm, kind of trying to shop those around a little bit and, see what happens with that.
Yeah. So, when did you start writing songs? Was it something you've been playing guitar for a long time and writing songs for a long time, or?
I was kind of felt like I was backing other people up a lot of the time. I picked up instruments, pretty young, and
Was guitar your first instrument? Or?
No, I started piano, I think, when I was 4 or 5, and then took lessons all through high school. So I feel like I had a pretty good education, and just, like kind of being obsessive with collecting music once I kind of got into that.
It seems like with
hole.
a piano background, that really helps musicians a lot with their just it seems like a really good foundation for writing music and understanding music. So that's cool that you suffered through the lessons. I don't know if they were difficult when you were a kid or not. Or
Oh, for sure. I think like it was always kind of something I was forced to do, and then I figured out like I can play, whatever it was at the time, maybe like Green Day songs like with these chords. Cool.
Okay.
And then that's when I kind of like started messing with the guitar.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like when you're learning an instrument, sometimes you can get off on the wrong foot if they're teaching you like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, or like, those hot cross buns and like those super simple songs that I remember when I started playing guitar, that was kind of the story. It was like these songs that I just would never play. And then finally when I learned like, this is how you play a Nirvana song, then all of a sudden I'm like, wow.
Yep.
Then it kind of clicks for you.
Yeah, I know. I think Wade in the Water Children was the first song I learned on guitar. It's like 2 or 3 chords, but you're not going to hear me playing Wade in the Water Children live anytime soon, probably.
Yeah. So after your piano, how long did you take lessons for? All through childhood, pretty much?
Yeah, all the way to the end of high school. I had a really great teacher. She was in Sydney, Ohio, and actually came up to Bowling Green to do a piano ensemble when I was in high school, which was super cool. Like, it was me and my brother, and I think 2 other friends came up, and we'd been practicing these piano duets where, 2 people sit down and one plays the bass half, one plays the higher parts, and got together with this other group of students, and I want to say it was like 40 pianos on stage, and you all play the same piece at the same time on like 40 pianos.
Oh, wow.
So like half the kids are playing one part, half are playing the other, and it was pretty awesome. That was like probably the highlight of my piano career.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I've seen I'm sure this is completely different, but it seems like have you seen the big Foo Fighters YouTube video where they do Learning to Fly, and it's like a football field full of people?
I think
so they have like
yeah.
have like 100 drum sets and 100 guitar players, and then like a whole choir of people singing the song. And
right,
stuff.
and it's just this like hurricane of sound happening.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds cool. Doing all those pianos and stuff. So then did you get into guitar in high school, or was that
Yeah, I mean, just like any high school kid, I was like, wanted to learn to play. I don't know what it was at the time. Probably like some dashboard songs or something.
Something for the
Something
ladies.
pretty. Oh, I don't know. Yeah, probably just something to soothe my angsty teen self, whatever it was. Some Death Cab songs or something. So, but yeah, I took it into college and was starting to play in like a couple like kind of folk bands and stuff at the time. A friend and I had like a project in college where, like I said, I was kind of backing him up. He wrote all the songs, save maybe one or two of them that I kind of helped him write, and then I would just like sing harmony vocals or whatever and pick up whatever instruments that he wanted on the songs, and from there kind of try to build up some confidence playing myself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. So what was your first? What was your first like band that you were in then? Out of like aside from, were you in high school band or anything?
Well, no, I was in like a garage band
Oh, okay.
in high school, and actually the kid that I'm doing this current electronic project I'm doing, Jello Ship. That's my friend Harold was the one who was in this like sort of garage band in high school.
Okay.
Um,
Now
so
Jello Ship. That's just the two of you. And
it's me, my brother, and then Harold. So it's a three-piece project.
and that's more of like in the electronic realm.
More like, yeah, it's like an electro pop kind of Depeche Mode, industrial sort of. We all kind of come from different areas, and my buddy Harold's the one that's writing the songs for that one. So
Okay.
we'll kind of bring different things to the table in terms of like what our influences are and what we are looking to do. But definitely Harold is like a big Depeche Mode, Nine Inch Nails, kind of like old school industrial
Yeah.
head.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm pretty influenced by that sort of realm too, with like Nine Inch Nails, like Marilyn Manson, Tool type stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I kind of missed the boat on a lot of that stuff. I kind of went down a different rabbit hole, but like I
Yeah.
definitely like going back. There's like some banging Depeche Mode records that I'm like, yes, like
Yeah.
yeah, I can really get into.
Yeah. So how long? Jello Ship, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
How
yeah.
long? How long you guys been doing that?
That was like 2014, I think, when we started, because we, have known each other for better part of 10 years or something, and he was like living close to where we were at the time, and it was like, hey, why don't we just get together, and we have a bunch of like synthesizers and drum machines sitting around not doing anything with, so let's get together and see what kind of things we can make happen. And
Yeah.
we just sort of brainstormed a little bit, like, what if we made an album, and what if it was like kind of a concept, and so it's kind of taken on its own sort of life, but it was just originally intended to be like an excuse to play with these toys.
Yeah.
So
That's cool. So have you guys released albums then?
yeah, so I want to say it was 2015 we put out a full length. It was called Arrow Crawler, and that's up on Spotify and everything if you feel like
Okay.
Digging
Check out
in.
Arrow Crawler.
digging it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we did an EP, which I wasn't really that involved with, but I was traveling at the time, so they the two of them did like kind of a collaborative EP called War EP, and that came out like end of last year.
Okay.
So
Have you guys? Do you do any sort of live representation of it, or is it more of just a studio project?
we have done a handful of shows, and nothing recently because we've kind of all been in different places geographically. So we're kind of looking ahead to thinking like what's the next thing going to look like, but definitely we kind of did some basement shows and stuff in the past. And
Yeah.
Made sure to have Jello shots at every
Yeah.
performance. Yeah.
No, that's definitely got to be the key for it. That's cool.
That's the whole reason we formed the band, really.
Yeah, so you could just have
yeah.
an excuse for Jello
For
shots.
interesting flavors of Jello shots.
So, that's cool. So what do you actually, when you perform, do you move around instrument-wise with this group, or is it more of synthesizing stuff, or are you playing guitar?
It's a big headache to try to figure out because my brother, when we started it, insisted that we weren't going to use laptops. It was all going to be hardware. And so, like, it's kind of... Now he purchased an MPC recently, so that would probably simplify things a lot. But in the past, what we've done is just, like, sequence drums and then kind of, played keyboards. Like, I think I had, like, 2 keyboards, like, in front of me, and then I was playing, like, a kick drum with my foot. So it was, like... Yeah, we all
Doing
just
a
were
lot of
kind of... Yeah, had our hands in a lot of different... things, but...
Yeah, that's always a challenge. It seems like, especially if you start as a studio project, and then when you're trying to represent it in a live fashion, sometimes you can be like, "Wow, I wish I wouldn't have done so many crazy things in the studio." Sometimes because it's hard to represent that.
It was kind of fun to, like, strip them down a little bit, and I think that's something, like, that certain electro bands do really well, is maybe they do have a super, like, repetitive bass line or something, but they make it work with a bunch of different, melodies and stuff. Like, when the chorus hits, maybe it's still the same bass line, but... they add, like, a clap on the beat and, like, different synth sounds or whatever to kind of spice it up. So that's kind of the fun of it for me, is, like, when we're writing, thinking, like, okay, how can we keep this relatively simple but still, like, interesting, intriguing to listen to, so that we're not, like, killing ourselves on stage, but also it's just, like, still... interesting for people. So
Yeah,
that's kind of the fun challenge of, like, kind of minimalism, maybe.
yeah. Well, and you don't want to do too many things, because if you're playing 4 instruments at once, man, it's gonna be it's pretty easy, I would think, to mess it up or to screw things up.
Yeah, no, we definitely have no mistakes during Jello Shot performances. It's unacceptable.
Yeah, I've experienced that a little bit with doing, like, solo looping stuff with the loop pedal and stuff.
Yeah,
like, sometimes you can get so complicated with just a variety of instrumentation and stuff that I don't know, it can get away from you sometimes if you get too crazy, because you also want to be able to at least look at the audience, or pay attention to what's happening in the crowd, and
right.
So
then that's something, so, like, with my solo material, I kind of worry about too, because I'm like in the middle of finishing up this album of my songs, just under Drew Joseph, and, like, I feel like every time we add a layer of, like, piano or some banjo or something that I'm maybe not, like, amazing at, I'm like, like, how am I gonna feel about going back to just playing these songs with a guitar or, like, a piano? It's like, I think that's, like, permissible. It's just kind of like, God, like, this would be so fun to play live. I just am, trying to put together a more full band for select shows. But often I'm just kind of traveling, playing.
Yeah, I noticed with what I saw. So I saw you playing just solo acoustic. I don't know. Would you consider that kind of in the folk realm? Genre-wise, if you were to describe it to people, or is it more, what would you describe it as? Yeah,
I'd say, like, folk or alt country or something like that. Like, I just, that's kind of my, that's sort of the rabbit hole I was speaking about earlier. That's kind of where I landed in college. I got, deep into, like, the Byrds and, Dylan, and, just kind of explored that for a while, and lately have been kind of trying to play with some different finger picking styles and things. So yeah, for sure, when I sit down to write, that's, like, usually the kind of stuff that comes out. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of. I actually, I don't know if I told you or not, but I played drums in like a folk kind of project. This guy Ben Stalitz in Toledo, and I joined up with him just a couple years ago. But for me, it's a completely new style. Like I don't know much about folk music at all, really, and so it's kind of been an introduction just being in the band with this guy for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
But he's kind of along those parallel lines of he was big into Dylan and big Tom Petty guy, and
Yeah, for sure.
so it's interesting. It's a new kind of music for me, I guess, even though it's been around forever. But I just was never really exposed to it as a kid, so
Right.
it is cool though.
What's that project called?
It's just Ben Stalitz.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes we're referred to as his wild ass band. But
Okay.
it's kind of just goes by his name. He does a lot of solo acoustic stuff around the country, and he goes on tours by himself. And then occasionally he'll take us along for gigs and stuff. So we're just a three-piece. We have a bass player, I play drums, and he just plays guitar and sings and stuff. So
Cool, cool. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
so do you have? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but do you have with this kind of style of music? Do you have actual band that you play with sometimes, or?
I kind of just like cherry pick some hired guns usually. I have a buddy, guitar player that will play electric and stuff with me that he's played with me in a number of years, and we had a little, cover band project in the past, just to kind of get out and be playing. But yeah, he's kind of like learning some of these songs. Like a lot of them, nobody has heard yet. Like I've had a solo set for a while, but just recently I've kind of felt a little more, motivation and a little more inspiration to write. So I think probably about half of this new album I'm doing, probably nobody has heard the songs yet, except for like my cat and my girlfriend.
Yeah, cool.
So-
Yeah, when you were playing at Howard's, I think that was your girlfriend that was there, and because I saw you guys talking or whatever. I think that was your girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was asking her while you were playing. I was like, "Are these all original songs?" Because I just didn't. I don't know a whole lot of folk. I wasn't sure if you were playing some old folk songs, but she's like, "No, they're all original." So I was like, "Oh, they're really cool."
Yeah, that's kind of like the good and bad thing about playing folk music is like there is this like super deep tradition, and it's like you can sort of wander into parody grounds at times if you're not very thoughtful with your songwriting. So I try to like do as best as I can to like sort of like dig from that history, but also try and keep it a little fresh, and that I'm not like just talking about the boxcar, riding the rails, or some, kind of
Yeah.
like really tired concepts that don't apply to me.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important with music sometimes to write about things that are happening in the world, and I think with the older folk style of music, there was a different world they were living in at that time. So I think if you're influenced by that time period sometimes and you bring it into this time period, you can kind of sound like you're copying a little bit. But if you're and I'm not saying that this is you at all. I'm saying this can happen to people.
I don't worry about copying at all. Like honestly, and then that's kind of the nice thing about that sort of tradition is like that's almost like part of it is you're like borrowing phrases, maybe like even some stylistic things. Like I tell you what, like talk about Dylan, my God, you listen to a Woody Guthrie compilation, he, like his early stuff at least, he stole almost directly from Woody Guthrie directly. So I mean, there's a history of that, and then Woody Guthrie was just basically playing Leadbelly's catalog. So to me, I don't consider myself necessarily in that lineage. That's not what I mean at all. But it's just the fact that, you can, I think, they say great artists steal or whatever. And I try not to be like on the nose about it or anything. But I definitely think anytime you see somebody play, you can learn from them. and you
Yeah.
can maybe pick something up like, oh, that really worked. Like this, like maybe a little rhythmic thing he's doing, or like this finger picking style or whatever it is. That'll just make you a better player in the end.
Yeah.
So,
And and I think to be an original is like it's not even possible really. I think if you're writing songs, they're influenced by somebody somewhere at some point. It seems like, and so I've written a lot of songs, and sometimes I'll go back and I'll think about just one little part of a song, and I'll be like, oh yeah, this is where that came from. Like it kind of, I can almost draw a line to some of the influences that I've had and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it seems like everything's been done, especially when it comes to chord progressions or
yeah, I don't tend to worry about that kind of a thing
Yeah.
so much, but I found like when I try to write very universal sort of themes, it's like often those are songs that don't really reach very many people, but then when I write very personally, it seems like those are the ones that people are like, hey, what was that song? And it's like, I think the more you write to your experience, maybe the more people can see that it's like genuine, maybe, or that they can connect to it because it's like maybe just a snapshot of a moment that they're like, oh, I've totally, had that same feeling or experience.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I kind of just started writing songs for myself, but that's what I've found just in playing them out is the ones that get the best response are usually, the ones that maybe mean the most to me on a personal level.
Yeah. So when you write songs, I don't know, I'm always interested in the process of songwriters. Do you generally have a certain way that you write them, or is it different every time? And can like for me, I do it in a lot of different ways, but if I were to describe the most, like the way that I do it most often, it's probably just playing a cool chord progression that I like on guitar and then coming up with a melody over top of it and then kind of forming that melody into lyrics. That's generally the way I would describe my process, the way it happens most often.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have? Do you have a certain process that you like to go by, or is it always different?
Man, my process is probably just like laying in bed with chips and hummus and like a notebook. I don't know though. I usually what happens is I will kind of like maybe hear a melody or something and I'll like have some, goofy like nonsense that goes along with it. And then it'll get stuck in my head and then I kind of will put some chords around it and then I don't know, or often I will like see just a little phrase or something that kind of sparks. And I'm like, what is that about? Like,
Yeah.
or I'll hear somebody say something that really just kind of hits me in a weird way. And
So
then maybe I'll like write it down and see if I can, build it into something.
Yeah. Yeah. So is it common for you to have lyrics written before a song, like almost, just writing random stuff in a notebook and then making a song out of that later?
It's pretty uncommon for that to happen. Often like a musical idea will come first, but every once in a while, there's like maybe one or two songs on this new album that's coming soon that I like probably sat down and banged out like the lyrics just like all in one sitting, which has never happened before. So every once in a while you get lucky and that kind of a thing happens, but a lot of times it's like I'll just, maybe get an idea for a verse melody and I'll write like
That's okay. That won't show up. Just had a weird noise come out of my computer.
Like, is the delivery here? Or?
So yeah, that's cool. I've never been able. I can't say that I've ever written a song on a notebook, like lyrically first, and then transferred that to a song. I know a lot of people do it that way. Like I've seen people that just have a notebook full of lyrics and poems, and they'll just. I think Elton John wrote a lot, or I think his writing partner wrote a lot like that. Like he he would just sing whatever lyrics you gave him. He would just put a melody to it and sing them out. For me, it's more, I always come up with the melody first, and I usually just am making up mumbo jumbo for words, or just like, or whistling, and
Sure.
then I try to just form those syllables into the melody. But yeah, I've never been able to just like write out a story or write lyrics and then make a song out of that. So it's
kind of the
interesting.
same way. It's like
Yeah.
once the musical idea comes, it sort of informs what is gonna happen in the song.
Yeah,
you know?
I think sometimes with the music too, you can kind of get the tone of like what the lyrics may sound like, just as like, okay, this music's a little bit darker, or this music's a little bit happier. Kind of like you said, it kind of informs the direction of the music, I think, or the lyrics.
Yeah, and I think just like some songwriters, maybe not that they don't put a lot of effort into their lyrics, but a lot of times it can maybe just be all about the mood or a specific like kind of imagery that they're looking to create. There's this guy, Phil Elverum, that I've been kind of following for years, and he had a project called The Microphones in Mount Erie, and he's been like super influential to me. But oftentimes, like, I don't maybe find, in his lyrics as much of like a narrative, as much as just like really intense imagery, or, just kind of evoking like a feeling, or
Kind of metaphorical.
right. And I think he's another kind of studio head that just kind of like messed around with making sounds that he liked, and
Yeah.
it grew into something giant. So, I mean, I don't have the luxury of a home studio like you. I'm sure that's probably a lot of fun. But yeah, like, what's your, I guess you said drums is your first instrument, but it sounds like you can just kind of like
Yeah,
play
well,
about anything you set your mind
yeah,
to.
I started early on drums in like fifth grade in band and stuff, and I played in high school band, marching band, and everything. And then I started playing guitar kind of late. I was in my early 20s. I was like 22, and so I've been playing guitar. And it was just a couple years ago. I was doing this one-man band thing, and I was doing like the loop pedal stuff.
And that's the onlys, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, the onlys. And I don't know, I just kind of got the idea that like I was always kind of shied away from having a home studio, because it's such like an intricate thing to learn how to mix and like how to like balance sounds. And it was just one of those things where I was kind of like, I would put it off, and I was really into video editing for a while, so I was making a lot of videos. And then one day I just decided, I was like, all right, I'm just gonna start learning about mixing and doing like a home studio type of thing. And this was just a few years ago. And so I just started like, going through YouTube videos and tutorials and stuff, and
Yeah.
just learning as much as I could about EQ and compression and, different sorts of plugins and how to use your DAW and how to record. And I'd done a lot of like home recording with bands that I'd played in. So I was experienced with recording myself. I just wasn't experienced with, once you had the tracks recorded, how to put them together and like give a good representation of them in a mix. So that was it was quite the learning process. A lot of my first mixes came out and they just sounded terrible, so I had to like go through and just like keep trying to figure it out and get better and better. And a lot of it too is it's more of like training your ears to hear things that you like
Totally.
wouldn't normally hear. So I definitely hear things now that I wouldn't have heard before. And I feel like my ears are trained better to hear, like, okay, this could use a little bit of compression, and I can understand why it would need that. And so, yeah, it was just a process of learning. And then I just, having the drumming background, at that point I'd been playing guitar for, 10 years or so. So I was kind of like, but the other thing was I didn't really know how to play bass, but I mean, I knew how to play guitar, so it was kind of, what I learned about bass was someone gave me a good tip. If you want to sound like a bass player and not a guitar player playing bass, playing the notes more staccato seems to be
Yeah.
the big difference between. But so yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'm a great bass player by any means, but it's more of
Well, having a drum background, I'm sure, like you kind of can feel it a little bit, you
yeah,
know.
yeah. That's the main thing I would do is I'd come up with a drum beat, and I would just try to follow the kick drum with the bass mostly. Just try to sync those two up so my rhythms generally follow the drums. But it's pretty much when it comes to the bass lines in my songs, I just go for the simplest thing I can, which seems to work for bass too. So
Oh, right. Yeah, totally.
the
But
cool thing about being a one man band though is you don't have the egos of I have to put in the coolest drum fill here, and I have to put in the coolest guitar lick here, and I have to put in the coolest bass line here. For me, it's more about just trying to make the best songs I can, and I don't really have to worry about trying to show off with my instrument because I'm playing the whole thing. So, but yeah, it's been pretty fun. The only is it's kind of just been one of those things. I wanted to grow it as a online band, and now recently, my online it's been growing pretty good, and I've found that I'm starting to get a little bit of a demand to have a live show. So that's kind of where I'm at now, is just trying to figure out how to represent the songs that I did in a studio by myself, how to make that happen on a stage by myself, which is right now it's just pretty much just a solo acoustic. But I don't know. I've tried using backing tracks and stuff, but
brave
I don't know.
man.
Yeah. Well, I only tried it a couple of times, and the whole time I was talking to the guy that was running the sound. I was like, man, I don't know, man. This might be cheesy. This might be super cheesy.
You're just like
But I'm
doing
just
the like rap show where you just like hit play and then
yeah,
you know.
the laptop on stage. Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know. Yeah, I got that feeling that the backing track probably I wasn't just going to be able to pull it off, but you know.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And honestly, I've seen some really compelling performances where, maybe you can't duplicate what you've done in the recording process, but if the song, like you said, if the songs are good enough, man, like I think you can make a laptop performance really great, especially if you can run a room.
Yeah.
For me, I just like to have my hands busy doing something,
Yeah.
It takes
Well,
the pressure
and
off.
if you look at like the explosion of EDM lately too, I mean, those guys, I mean, they're doing stuff with on the DJ tables, but some of them are just pushing buttons and dancing too. So,
Sure.
but honestly, I'm probably in deep waters there. I don't know a whole lot about the EDM scene, but
Oh, me neither. I think we can probably, we'll give each other a pass on that one.
yeah, I'm pretty sure that they do stuff, but sometimes I think they just jump around too. I think a lot of it is in studio beforehand programming stuff, and
I think it's mostly about the haircuts, really.
Yeah?
I think that's, I think that's how you get big as an EDM star. But
so are you around the Toledo area?
yeah, so right now I'm living in Bowling Green temporarily, and definitely trying to like reach into the Toledo scene a little bit.
Is this your home base? Are you from here originally, or
No, so I like grew up in mid-central Ohio. Same kind of scenery. A lot of cornfields and stuff like that.
yeah?
And
Gets
then
a little bit hillier when you get south, but
yeah, well, I was
maybe
gonna
not in
say I lived
Central.
down in Cincinnati for a number of years too, like in the past. So I'm kind of bouncing around. I might try, the other corner, maybe Cleveland or something in the future. But so I am here working with Harold on some new Jelloship stuff, and we're actually trying to scrape together like a graphic novel based on some of the like themes and stuff in the music. So we meet like weekly to kind of start developing that. But then we're also sort of playing with some new equipment and trying to, like, he's got a new Arturio synth, which is a lot of fun. We kind of been like trying to play with some more like analog gear and figure out how we can maybe, create some new, kind of branch out a little bit from what we're doing and start writing some different stuff.
I like this graphic novel idea. So is that are you an illustrator? Is Harold an illustrator? Are you guys doing a lot of like, drawings type stuff, or is it
Harold is an ideas man? I'll say, yeah. And I got my bachelor's in like fine art, so I have a background there and have kind of like put it down for a little bit. Once you kind of get grinding and working, it's like you only have so much time. But
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what's your favorite medium with art? Like, what do you like to?
Definitely oil paint.
Okay.
It's like definitely the messiest, but I don't know. Once I kind of dug into that, it was like I didn't really want to do much else.
Yeah.
Like sketching and stuff. That's like the background, or the backbones, rather, of everything. If you can learn to draw and sketch well, you can probably get a good handle on about any medium you want. But probably for this project, though, it's going to be just a lot of pencil drawing and then maybe some coloring in Photoshop. I've never done anything like this before, so we're kind of just like, looking at a lot of graphic novels that we like and like, oh, I like that, and maybe this looks simple enough, we could probably pull it off. Like, it's not going to be a Stan Lee thing for sure. It might be more of like a South Park thing, but definitely it's just kind of like energized me a little bit creatively, because it's a new way to kind of look at some of the stories that Harold has written. I guess I should mention that album Arrow Crawler that we did has sort of like a narrative to it, and this graphic novel will kind of be fleshing that out a little bit more and kind of making sense of like, okay, so the Arrow Crawler is like a spaceship and these are the characters. So it's like a little, maybe.
No, that's really cool.
Yeah. So it's fun. It's just something we kind of like enjoy doing. So
yeah. I was always liked sketching and drawing. One of my favorites was like doing portraits of people. I always liked drawing people and faces.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of as far as I ever took it. I was in art in high school and stuff, but I was never good at painting, but I never really gave it a chance either. Like, just the transition from a pencil to a paintbrush in your hand, I never even got past that. Like, I was at very beginning stages of just never practiced painting.
Yeah, it's a different thing, definitely. But yeah, I and there are only so many hours in the day,
Yeah.
it's
That's
like,
cool that you found something though with the graphic novel that's kind of putting that fine arts degree, that background of yours, and it's mixing it with music, and it seems like a pretty symbiotic relationship there. So
definitely. And I think like kind of I think they're hard to separate. Just being a kid, and like I got into skateboarding, and a lot of the artwork like on skateboards, like in the clothes and kind of like just the magazine culture and stuff. It was like I saw a lot of really inspiring artists that maybe weren't trained, but they were like finding ways to do really complex things with really simple maybe skill set. Just like learning color theory. Like, you can maybe be terrible at drawing. If you get good at color theory, you can make some like amazing things. So that was really inspiring to me. It was like, I could like draw cartoons or whatever, but it was like that was maybe what kind of pushed me to pursue it a little deeper and to like make a connection that it's something I can access. It's not like this thing where you have to, paint a masterwork and have it framed and stuff. It's like, no, I'm just going to scribble on some cardboard and maybe spray paint it and whatever. So eventually I did transition into, getting a little more sophisticated, but I still love to sketch on cardboard and stuff and use charcoal.
Yeah.
And I think you should never be scared. I think just like getting passionate and learning, like you can, I don't know. I'm kind of getting a little esoteric here, but I think it's, definitely linked into the music because, my dad had a bunch of cool old LPs, and a lot of those had like oil paintings and big spreads and stuff. And so naturally I got into record collecting, but I love the format of the 12-inch because there's so much more space and there's like room for maybe 6 paragraphs instead of like maybe a little sentence in a CD case, or you don't have to have this giant booklet. You've got like at least 4, if it's a gatefold, you got 4 like spaces for artwork, and you can sit here like holding it, and I don't know, that was like pretty important, I think, too.
Yeah. I always compare. I always find myself comparing songs I write to paintings.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's mostly in my head. Like, I don't really talk to people a lot about it, but I'm like, I don't know. I always think of like, and sometimes even when I see bands, I have that thing sometimes where I'm like, well, they're good at what they do. What they do isn't necessarily something that I'm really that much into, but they're good at what they do. And like, so if I compare that to painting, it's kind of like if you see a painting of a image that, it may be like a dark, scary painting that you may not want to have in your house, but it's a really well done painting of a dark, scary painting. So
Sure.
I don't know. I consider like, because some of my stuff I feel like gets into the dark side a little bit, and so like that's kind of how I just describe it to people. It's like if I was, or in the same realm of like Stephen King, he writes these thrillers and horror type novels. But I mean, he is a pretty weird guy in real life too. I was gonna say, but he's not out there like killing people or acting out on these things. But it might be a bad example because he's a little crazy.
Yeah, let's hope he's not committing
Yeah.
homicides out there.
Yeah, but like I don't know. Sometimes when people are like, "Oh, that song's very dark," like, "What's up with that?" Like, I'm like, "Well, it's just like painting a scary picture. It's not really necessarily something that I am going to go out and act upon, or I'm not going to go like if it's almost like if I was going to make a scary movie, it's not, that doesn't mean I'm a murderer or anything.
Sure, and there's just like this kind of human fascination with like car accidents or like really dramatic events. Like, why do people, rubberneck on the highway when they see like a semi get rolled over? Or like, why are there all these TV shows about people doing horrible things to each other and like drug cartels and stuff? Like, we love that shit, It's like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, and that's kind of, I've always been attracted to like we were talking earlier with the industrial, dark, maybe gothic style of music. Like Tool was always one of my favorite bands, and they're like, their whole thing is that dark mysteriousness. I don't know if you know much about Tool, but
a little bit. And it's like there's kind of a theater to it,
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard Howard Stern say things like, "I don't like happy songs. I only like songs that make me sad." So, I mean, it's just sort of with that rubbernecking idea, where like sometimes people just want to hear dark music and brood about it or whatever.
Right,
so.
and it can be fun to, kind of pretend maybe that you have this like, I don't know, these like really heavy, important problems that
I'm super intense, man.
I don't know.
No, I know.
And
what you're saying.
right, and I try to. I've been kind of challenging myself. Like, if I find myself writing lyrics that are getting a little too doom and gloom, like maybe I can marry this with like kind of a groovy beat or something, so it like there's kind of this wink and a nod, like, yeah, I'm kind of going to some of these places where maybe you don't want to listen to a whole song about, ecological disaster, but if you put it over like a Rolling Stones kind of a vamping thing, then hey,
Yeah,
it's a good time.
it's a good
So
combination. Yeah, they say that's what made Lennon and McCartney click so well. Is McCartney was always kind of a happier sort of songwriter, and then they say Lennon kind of brought in a little bit of that darkness, and so then a lot of their songwriting when they did it together or whatnot would be Paul McCartney with a real happy, cheery song, and then Lennon would come in and just bring in a little bit of darkness to just bring it down a notch or whatever. So
yeah, or like tell him like, Paul, like, stop being so soft. We're a rock band. Like, let's turn it up and scream.
yeah,
But yeah, it's interesting too, like to look at their solo records after the Beatles. Like a lot of John's stuff, yeah, it does go to a lot of dark places, and so does Paul sometimes, interestingly. But I think my favorite of that kind of is probably Paul McCartney's Ram. Do you know that one?
not offhand.
Yeah, it's like, but this was pretty soon after the Beatles. I want to say it was like 72 or 73, and he kind of home recorded it all, which is kind of neat to see like what he does in that sort of a setting.
Yeah, I'm sure back then though a home recording required rich and famous guy to have a home studio. I would think, like unless he was just
Yeah, I
doing
mean,
it on like a
it's
4-track tape or something. But
I don't know much about the recording process, but yeah, I'm sure,
I don't
like
think they
post
could.
Beatles, Paul McCartney was like, what can I spend this
Yeah,
mountain of money on?
yeah,
Perhaps a home studio in, the middle of Scotland in the country. So, but
yeah, totally. But yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, they definitely weren't doing it on a laptop, but I'm sure he had some sort of really elaborate studio set up in his house. But that's cool. Yeah.
yeah, so like what are some of the other projects you've done here in this studio? Are you still kind of getting your footing, or?
Yeah, I've only actually been in this house since August. Before that, I was living up in Toledo
Okay.
in an apartment. And so what I would generally do, I recorded and released an album in 2016. And I actually used my parents' basement to record it in. They have a house out in the country.
Classic.
Yeah. The biggest thing for me is just finding a place to play drums. And a lot of times my hours are really, like I'm up in the middle of the night recording and stuff. So
Yeah, sure.
like having neighbors is not really an ideal situation. So yeah, I did that whole album in my parents' basement, but then I took everything back to my apartment and mixed it in a mixing room. So I've only been here since August, and I actually just finished recording the first full song that I've done in this studio. So
Cool.
it sounds pretty good. I like the room. As you can see, I have sort of like some acoustic treatment on the walls that does pretty good, but it's pretty much just the reverb in here is not great. So when I record, I try to just kind of isolate it and try to get just a very clean sounding recording.
Totally.
And it's always nice to get a natural reverb, but in here the natural reverb kind of sounds like crap. So, but the first song that I've recorded, I actually just think I finished it a couple days ago. It sounded really good. So
Nice.
I like the sound quality I got out of it. The first album that I recorded in my parents' basement, they have a really perfect basement when it comes to getting a really clean, isolated sound, because they have like 4-inch thick, like almost insulation padding on all the walls.
Oh, cool.
So everything is super dead. There's no reverb at all. So you can get just like a straight up unadulterated, like just clean sound. Which a lot of times with home recordings, and I feel like that's kind of the best way to go, because In a professional studio, a lot of times you're dealing with like a suspended floor in a perfectly treated acoustic room, and they can get really great natural acoustics out of the room. But to get that, you almost have to have a room that's built to be a studio. You almost have to have like that in mind when you're making it. So if you're making a studio out of your bedroom or your living room, a lot of times you'll get the best recordings if you just try to get rid of the room. Just forget about the room and just try to get as clean a recording with nothing else. And then, add in a reverb or some sort of delay, or, just try to add in that space in the mixing process, which, like I said, it's not the ideal way to do it. The ideal way would be to be in like a super expensive studio that's built for it. But when you're doing it at home and you're doing it yourself, I mean, got to work with what you got. So
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. That's been the approach that I'm using on this like solo album. My brother, my other brother, I guess, he lives in Nashville, and he's got a home set up there.
oh, cool.
And he's trying to make a go of it as like an audio engineer, and he's finding some success. But right now, yeah, he has a home studio, and I've just kind of been going back and forth down there to work on these songs.
What's the name of the studio? Does he have a name for it?
I don't know if he has a name for it yet.
Anything
'cause
I
it's
could
just at
advertise
home.
for him? Does he have like a website or anything?
He does have a website. I think it's just aaronroshot.com. I should know this. That's terrible. But yeah, he's kind of been demoing some things for some Nashville guys, and he's been playing with a band called the Whistles and the Bells,
Oh, cool.
and kind of collaboratively recording and mixing with those guys.
Is he a guitar player, multi-instrumental guy?
He's actually a drummer too, so I'm sure you guys
okay.
would have a lot to talk about. But he's also a multi-instrumentalist. Like it's kind of scary the way that he can just pick up instruments. But drums, I think, are his main instrument, and he's been at that for probably well over 10 years now. And he kind of gigs out regularly doing that.
Oh, cool.
But
I was gonna say Nashville's definitely a good place to be for audio engineers and like studio work. And there's a lot of studios down there too, so you got a lot of competition, I guess.
right, he's found kind of that. I think doing the demos can be kind of a nice way to start out, just getting sketches of songs that maybe people with contracts and publishing deals can then try to sell to the big country music stars down there.
Yeah.
So you got to start somewhere, but he's always kind of had a hand in recording. Like that band that I was in high school, he, I think, did most of that recording, and that's where he kind of started, just with like Audacity and like a cheap PC,
Yeah.
and from there now he's got like a full home studio with like really excellent microphones and preamps and stuff. So it's really cool to see the way that's evolved, and it's a lot of fun to go work with him too, because he's got a great ear for kind of like arrangement, and he'll definitely tell you like, hey, no, don't do this, like when you're getting this bass part or whatever.
Kind of got an ear
So-
for being a producer type
Right.
production.
So that, I think, is going to be a big help to me, just because sometimes I have trouble seeing the whole picture. But
Yeah. Well, it's hard sometimes too when you're in the forest to see the trees. Like when you're so in. Like sometimes when I play a song and I've played it 100 times when I'm writing it, like you kind of lose perspective on what the song sounds like. And it's interesting too, because sometimes as a band there's been times where we've been practicing a song and we've played a song over and over and it sounds really good, and then we will record it on an iPhone or something, just something simple. And then when you listen back to it, you're like, wow, that song sounds a little bit different than I was even hearing playing it.
right.
So you've been recording this new album in Nashville, kind of. That's where you've been doing all of it? with your brother?
Well, I did one of the songs in somebody's home studio out in Los Angeles.
Oh,
Yeah, so that's kind of a long story, but last June I took a road trip out to the West Coast and spent a few months like in Alaska and California. Um,
wow.
and
For some reason, I don't think of Alaska as the West Coast, but I guess it is.
yeah, it's kind
It's the
of
Northwest.
yeah, the general.
Oh, that's really cool.
So like yeah, I think probably maybe 1.5 songs were recorded out there, but the bulk of it's happening down in Nashville.
Yeah.
Um,
So you
so
sound like a traveling man. You've done a lot of traveling over the years?
probably, yeah. I think this last summer was kind of a new experience for me. I'd never done like a straight, well, actually, I had done a cross country road trip, but it was like in a very short time, so I didn't have time to stop and see the sights. But yeah, I guess my girlfriend and I got a job in Alaska doing like salmon fish
Like a
processing.
fishery?
Yeah, yeah, and she had done it a couple years before, so she was like, "Hey, why don't we try this out?" And it's like an excuse to go to Alaska. I actually have a couple of friends from college that are up there, so
Yeah.
it was a good way to get up there and to kind of
They say
reconnect
when
with
the
them.
salmon runs happen, that's like super busy. Were you doing like 16-hour days of like
Oh yeah,
filleting
sometimes
fish?
like 20-hour days. Yeah,
Wow.
it once they move, man, it's like you know, there's no way to kind of curb the flow. You have to just
Yeah, you're
keep
just
it moving and crank it out. Yeah.
so is it just a seasonal thing? How long does the season last?
Yeah, so where we were, it was up on Bristol Bay, and to be a processor, it was like just a month.
Hmm.
The actual salmon run is only a week or two, but they get you up for about a month
Yeah.
to kind of get things ready and get you
Is it
moving.
like Deadliest Catch where you make enough money in that month to support yourself for the rest of the year?
Yeah, no, not quite. But
Working like 100-hour weeks?
if you go work on a boat, definitely you can pull in maybe 30 or 40 grand in a month or so. But we were just doing processing. It's not quite that good.
Yeah.
But
That
definitely it
still
gave us
sounds like
some
a cool adventure though.
yeah, and it gave us some money that we could, maybe spend a few months just kind of traveling and not have to worry too much about getting jobs just yet. So
Yeah. So was most of that travel time, were you playing gigs at the time, or was it mostly just traveling and checking out stuff?
it wasn't. I didn't spend a lot of time playing, but I did get a few opportunities just to kind of hit some open mics and play a few little gigs here and there. Um, yeah, when we were up in the cannery, there's like the town it's in. There are like maybe 5 canneries, a post office, and 3 bars, and that's like all there is.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I had a few times where like we weren't busy. We got to go over and play the open mic over there, and they have like kind of as the season ends, they get some bands from down in the lower 48 to come up and play, just to kind of like entertain the fishermen so they don't beat each other to death and go crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a cool thing, and it's kind of a long-standing thing. So they have some things in place, like they have like a salmon fest and stuff at the end of the year, which is pretty fun.
Yeah. So is that something you think you would do again? You gonna go back?
I would love to. It's at the time you just are like so sleep deprived and stuff. You're just kind of like grinding it out, But I think for the experience that it was, like you meet some of the craziest people you've ever seen in your life. But it's a lot of fun, and I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for a way to get up to Alaska. It's you
Yeah.
do like a month, and then you walk away with maybe 4 or 5 grand, and then you have a little bit of wiggle room. You can maybe go travel and explore the state a little bit.
Yeah.
So
So with your travels, what's some of your favorite destinations or places you've been?
well, up in Alaska, I'd say Girdwood was a lot of fun. That's like just maybe a half hour from Anchorage. But it's kind of this like, I think maybe uh, all of the fans of the Grateful Dead live there,
Oh,
like every single one.
a lot
But
of, lot of tie dyes.
it's a fun little town, and a lot of really good food. They had a couple like music festivals going on when we were there, like in August. They have like a blueberry festival. Um,
Now, was that the time of the year where darkness doesn't come around? Is that,
no, so that's the opposite, where it's
oh,
like
okay.
it stays light until 11 o'clock midnight. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
It's not as weird as you would think. It's kind of just like you look at the clock and you're like, oh wow, it's like midnight, but it feels like maybe 7 or 8.
Mm. Just like a little dim
Yeah, so it's kind of
evening.
like dusk for a long time. It's not like
Yeah, it's
high
not like,
noon all day, which is
right.
kind of what I had thought, before. But um, yeah, I don't know about those Alaskan winters. I think those might get to me.
It seems pretty brutal.
You might.
I like watching the shows on TV though, like the Survivor shows or the what is it, 30 Below Zero? I think where they're up in the Arctic Circle.
Yeah, there's a bunch of those. I don't really know about
Those,
that, but
yeah, I don't know. There's some pretty good ones. There's what is it, Bush something
bush
about
pilots or something.
Bush,
or
yeah, Bush pilots, and then there's Alaskan Bush people. I think I've watched a few episodes of that one too. It's just like this family that lives out in the wilderness in Alaska.
Yeah, it's funny. This Airbnb that I stayed at in California, the woman that ran it has a cousin up in Alaska in Homer that we had tried to work for. It didn't work out, but then it was like we met her cousin down in Los Angeles, and it was like, all these weird kind of little connections. But she, I think, had been involved in one of those shows, and like her family owns a farm that they had filmed, and it's like a pretty small world up there. Like we met a few people, like older people that had been involved in the music scene or other like creative projects up there, and it was like kind of everybody knows everybody. It was like, oh yeah, so and so from Anchorage, or yeah, they're way up there in Fairbanks, yeah, or it's like it's amazing how big of a state it is and just how tight knit it seems.
Yeah,
I'm sure
I
that
think
was kind of like a little bit of like tourists, maybe idealism, but it seems like there's a really cool community of people up there that
yeah.
are pretty well connected.
Yeah, I think it definitely helps the community when I mean, in the wintertime, some of that harsh conditions, you kind of have to rely on each other a little bit more, I think, than you would around here. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you kind of have to know your neighbors in case you need them for something or,
Yeah, it can be like life or death, like overnight for sure.
yeah, yeah. Oh, that's cool. What's some of your favorite venues you've played? You got any favorites?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There's a lot of really cool spaces down in Cincinnati. Like I said, I lived there from like 2014 to 16. I mean, Motor Pub is great. That's like a place that a lot of out of town bands will play down in there. There's a really like cool bar that I like down there, the Listing Loon, that I would play at a lot. And they're kind of like songwriter centric. They have a lot of kind of smaller acts in there, and it's
Yeah.
nice because it's kind of like a wine bar sort of cocktail place. So you're sort of like, you're not there to kind of yell at each other over like a giant jukebox or whatever. It's kind of like a more intimate feel.
Yeah.
The bartenders are great, super friendly. So I mean,
Have you done like any sort of big festivals or like with some big name acts or like national acts or anything?
not so much. I did a couple shows with Denison Whitmer, like back in the day. Lately,
Yeah.
it's been a lot of kind of smaller house show type, kind of small clubs. I've been looking into some festivals, and I think once I have this new album out, I'll feel a little bit better about trying to like sell myself to that sort of scene. So definitely that's something I'm looking forward to.
Yeah.
Maybe next summer.
Do you have a release date in mind, or are you just kind of playing it by ear when you get it done?
I'm hoping to have it done by June.
Okay.
It's like getting pretty close. We're kind of like shaving up the arrangements and tightening things up and editing.
How many songs do you think it's going to be? Any idea? Or if anything's a secret, just don't.
Yeah, I'm still
spill the beans.
trying to decide. It's like I kind of dropped a few and picked up a few, so it'll probably be sitting around 10 songs.
Oh, cool.
And
you thinking you're going to do physical copies? You're going to make vinyl, or
love to do vinyl. I decided not to do any fundraising or anything this time. I didn't feel like maybe that was the right way to do this. So it's all self-funded. So I may do like a small run of cassettes or CDs or something, and then probably just kind of like focus on the digital. But I like the idea of like maybe like a limited edition with like maybe like hand done artwork or something like that. So that might be something I'm looking into doing.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with your background, that'd be a really cool thing to include as, artwork from you.
Yeah, and that's like something that always has kind of pushed me over the edge to buy maybe someone's music that I didn't like already really want to grab. It'd be like, oh my God, look at this like LP sleeve. Like, it's beautiful. Like I think that can be like definitely a valuable piece to the whole equation.
Do you think that transfers to oh my God, look at this cool thumbnail? Like,
man, I don't know, but I've always been really obsessive with like iTunes, with like having the artwork, because I think even if just to see it on like a little iPod screen, it's still cool to like associate it with that artwork, even if it is like tiny. It's maybe, it's kind of like your Twitter biopic. Like maybe it's super pixelated. It's not a good representation of you. Maybe it's just a picture of a sandwich, but it's something to throw in with the whole package.
Yeah, it's something to have for people too. It's kind of I don't know. It's one of those things that's somewhat a little bit sad for musicians, but I mean that's just the way it is. It kind of, but to have spend all this time on an album, and then you realize that somebody's just going to be listening to an MP3 through their phone of it.
Yeah, and to me, maybe that's not such a concern. I'm sure to my brother, who's producing it, it would be.
Yeah.
He's like an audio guy. But I think if I can just get the songs across, that's like maybe the first thing. I love collecting vinyl. I love CDs and tapes and stuff. Like, to me, the format maybe doesn't make as much of a difference sometimes, but just kind of like communicating the idea. And I do agree. I think like for certain kinds of music, to listen to it on MP3 just feels like the wrong way to do it. Like if you're going to listen to like, I don't know, John Coltrane or like a jazz trio or something, you should probably just find the LP and listen to it.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's like stereo panned, and if you have like a good speaker setup, you can like move over to the speaker when like the piano solo is coming or something, and like, so I mean,
there's definitely things on those formats that you will hear that you don't even realize were there if you were just listening to the MP3. It's like, oh, I didn't know that. That sounds a lot warmer, or even just a little, like you were saying, the double side, the stereo, having things come at you from different directions and stuff. It's definitely represented a lot better in some of the better the vinyl formats, or even CDs.
Mm-hmm. But maybe like you really just like current pop music, or maybe like whatever it is, sometimes MP3s really suit that format. And like some things I will just buy the MP3 because it's like, definitely I want to have this on my phone to like plug in someone's car and,
Yeah, I was listening to Chris Lord Alge. I think he's a big engineer, producer guy. I don't know if you've heard of him. But he's done a lot of, I think he did Kings of Leon's albums.
Okay.
Actually, I'm not actually sure which albums he's done. I know he's done a lot of famous albums, but he was doing, it was some sort of talk. I think it might have been a TED Talk. and he was just talking about the difference between WAV files and MP3s, and he was definitely an audio sort of
Nerd.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
a little bit snobbish. Like he was, like not that he was snobbish, but he was like, he was definitely advocating not listening to MP3s. And one of the things he said about MP3s that was interesting to me is that there's so much of a loss in data that your ears kind of make up the difference from what you don't hear. It's almost like it's a perceived thing that's supposed to be there.
Interesting.
And your ears, so when they make it down to an MP3, it takes away some of like the reverb tails, and just a lot of the information is missing.
Uh-huh.
But it's information that's missing that your ears just automatically make up the difference.
It's like when you read those like scrambled sentences, you
Exactly.
can like read them still.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
But yeah, he said it was like that, and then he also brought up the point that I think he was talking to a kid who had been listening to music for a few hours on his headphones, and he was listening to MP3s, and the kid came in and he was like, I'm exhausted. He was like tired of listening to music.
Huh.
And he said that that's a new phenomenon with MP3s because your brain is making up the difference of what you're missing.
Oh,
The
weird.
music can actually wear you down a little bit if you're listening to it for hours on end in like headphones,
Yeah.
as compared to like a vinyl format where you're getting all the information can actually be more relaxing and like not wear you down. It's more of a energizing thing.
Well, sure. And with vinyl, you have to exercise. You have to stand up
Yeah.
and change the record.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know. I don't know that I've ever been listening to MP3s and been like, oh, I'm getting so tired of listening to music. But apparently that's a thing. So
Huh. Yeah. It could be bad for your health. Let's get Michelle
Yeah.
Obama to like do a
No
campaign
more
against MP3s.
It's interesting that the audio's gone that way because, you know, with movies, it's more about HD, getting better and better quality and the best picture quality you can. And then when it comes to music, people are like, well, I'd just rather have simplicity and ease rather than higher quality. Because, I mean,
Just like a pure waveform, maybe. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, just wave files are just bigger, a lot more data, and so they're harder to handle than MP3s. But it is interesting that they would rather have the convenience of MP3s rather than higher quality like they would with TV. Like, oh, I want like the best picture I can get. You know,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just an interesting sort of difference there. So,
Yeah.
so where can we check out your stuff? At Drew Joseph on Facebook? Is that where?
Yeah. Facebook, Drew Joseph Music.
Okay.
If you just want to do the URL. And I'm really active on Instagram right now, just kind of
Okay.
giving people updates on the album. And my handle is Attempted Mustache.
Nice.
It's, yeah, it's like.
Is it a biographical?
Well, I do
Yeah.
have a lot of trouble growing a mustache. Yeah, but it's
Okay.
actually like a Loudon Wainwright album that really just
okay.
one of his lesser works that
I
really
have,
grabbed me.
I have trouble growing a beard, so I should make an album. Attempted beard,
Yeah, Patchy Beard Man.
patchy beard man. Yeah, I
Yeah.
do have big patches missing.
So yeah, and then hopefully, once I have things released, we'll be, getting them up on all the streaming and everything. So
Yeah, cool. Do you have any shows booked right now? Are you planning any live shows coming up?
yeah, so this Friday on 4/20, I'm playing down in Salina, Ohio, at Brew Nation Coffee House.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's a great little spot, kind of off the beaten path a little bit. And then I'm playing a house show this month on the 29th around Worcester College.
Cool.
So,
You mentioned you're into the house shows. Do you do a lot of house shows?
yeah, that's kind of been a place that I really feel comfortable, and it's just a nice environment because, people come there for the music.
Yeah.
It's like cozy.
How do you? I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but how do you generally go about booking a house show? Is it generally just people that you're friends with, or you've met along the way that tend, or is there like a website? Because I know there's like what is that, couch surfing website where you can surf across the U.S. on people's couches.
Yeah, there's definitely some online communities for that
Mm.
that I've kind of tapped a little bit, but a lot of it is just like networking and a lot of people that do the singer-songwriter thing, I feel like are kind of more knowledgeable about like where to go and what to, look for and who to connect with. And I've also just like thrown a lot of house shows myself, like when I had the opportunity. And those are some of my like favorite moments, just because it's like maybe you don't have like a huge turnout, maybe it's like 10 people in a room, but you're just kind of like sharing songs and maybe have like food after and a bonfire. So it's a fun, time, and I think that my style of music kind of translates well in that space.
Yeah.
Rather than like a noisy bar.
Yeah.
So
Cool. Well, let's wrap this up, man. I appreciate you coming over and doing this. It's been fun.
absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and everybody check out Drew Joseph and his music and Jello.
Jello Ship, which you can just go to
Jello
jelloship.com, and I think, that'll have links to all the albums. And
You
I
can
think,
find that on Spotify as well. What was the name of
Yeah.
the album again?
Arrow Crawler and War EP we have up on Spotify and Apple
Okay.
Music and everything.
And be on the lookout for the new graphic novel to go along with it.
Yes, as yet to be titled, but yeah, that should be
Yeah.
happening within the next year.
Cool. All right, well, thanks a lot, Drew Joseph.
Yeah, thanks.
All right.